Hi, welcome to another edition of the Mediatwits. I'm Mark Glaser, Executive Editor of PBS MediaShift. This week we'll be talking about the dog and pony show known as the Upfronts that the TV networks do for advertisers and marketers each year, and the Digital NewFronts, the effort by a lot of digital players and large publishers like YouTube, Hulu, AOL, Yahoo, and others to get some of the TV money to move online and into digital video. What worked this year? What didn't work? What was ridiculous? We'll be talking about that with our panel this week. And speaking of the panel, let's introduce them to you. We have Andrew Lee from American University, regular on the Mediatwits. We have Dawn Chmielewski from Recode. We have Fannie Cohen, our Mediatwits producer from New York. We have Jeanine Poggi from Advertising Age, who is deep in the weeds of the upfronts, and we'll be going to another one today. Let's start with you, Jeanine. What's the feeling out there with the new fronts versus upfronts? Every year this comes up with these kind of online players trying to kind of steal a little bit of the thunder and say, look, everyone is spending their time, especially younger people, are not really spending as much time on TV, in front of the TV, but also looking at things like YouTube and streaming video sites. So there's been this movement in media usage, but there hasn't been movement in ad dollars. Do you think this is the year things might finally change?
Yeah, you know, for a while the new fronts really weren't being taken very seriously in the ad community. It was a fun time and a good time to go and see some of the, short form digital series that have been popping up. But no one was really taking them super seriously. And I think now, as we start to see longer form content start popping up, renewals of some of these digital series, and really digital players investing a lot more money into content and marketing the content, that we're actually starting to see ad buyers and advertisers take them seriously.
So you think there's a good chance the money will be moving, even if it's a little bit, even if it's not a ton, it's something.
Right. I think money has already started to shift. I think, though, that there isn't really that many opportunities out there to have the reach and audience that a TV show would have. So it's really limited into the amount of money advertisers can shift over to digital, but certainly some is shifting.
And what did you see that was impressive in the new fronts? Was there a player that you thought was stronger than you expected?
I think a few different things were interesting. I thought Hulu was interesting, not that they introduced really any new content, but they renewed a lot of content, which is a really good sign because advertisers are really looking to see some of these digital players build franchises. And in the past, they come out and maybe some of these things last for one season, disappear, you never hear of them again. When a TV network goes out and shows off some of these shows, they're not looking for these to go away after one season. They're looking to build franchises that last year over year. And not that that always is the case, and we see a lot of things canceled early on, even with TV networks. But we want to see that they're actually trying to build things that'll last for longer than one season. So I think that was interesting with Hulu. YouTube is doing a really good job marketing its homegrown talent. And that's really, great to see that they're going to TV and actually marketing their stars on TV. A few others, Crackle renewed Jerry Seinfeld's riding in cars with comedians through 2016. So, bringing some of these big TV personalities into the digital space was one of the bigger trends that we were seeing.
Dawn, I saw you nodding your head. You agree that the online players have kind of made a little bit more of a splash. They're using celebrities. They have long-form content now. It's all not these kind of webisodes and tiny, pieces, snackable content. They're actually really pushing TV-like shows, it seems like.
Well, I felt what was most intriguing to me, especially about YouTube's presentation, and they're an interesting bellwether because they just account for so much viewing online, something on the order of 1 billion different unique users a month around the world, if you believe the numbers. Is that they veered away from all of the celebrity sizzle, and they began sort of touting their homegrown talent, which is really what attracts millions of views on their site. You know, they went through a period a little over a year ago where Google financed YouTube, put a lot of money into try to subsidizing this more professional grade content. And I think what the experiment showed is that these digital natives who've grown up on the platform actually know how to program to that audience really well. So that's what I found was interesting, was sort of YouTube was embracing the YouTubers who have succeeded and are addressing one of the big problems that YouTube has had with the platform, or the big complaint I hear in Hollywood, which is nothing succeeds in a vacuum. Even in Hollywood, when a big movie opens, you'll see billboards, you'll see commercials, and that was absent in the platform where it was needed the most, in a place like YouTube, where you've got billions of videos that you're competing against. You know, the programmers really wanted to see some marketing push, and I think that was one of the significant shifts this year in the digital media NewFronts.
Okay, Andrew, and you had a question about some of what was happening in the upfronts.
Yeah, certainly. I think one of the things that people were pointing to was that ABC made a pretty bold move to embrace a number of pilots in the ethnic side of things. So they greenlighted 3 series that hit at 3 different ethnic groups. One was Blackish, one was Cristela, which targeted Hispanics, and Fresh Off the Boat for Asian American. And I think ABC is getting a lot of headlines for kind of going long tail on those offerings that are going to be airing on their broadcast channels. I'm wondering if you folks see any interesting trends there, and is ABC trying to address this more long tail audience that maybe YouTube and Netflix were pioneers in doing?
Yeah, I definitely think that ABC is making some of the biggest push into introducing content that has a little bit more diversity in it. American Crime is actually another good one that they're introducing in the second half of next year, sort of exploring racial tension, a more serious drama piece. Cristela is another one with a Latin voice to it. And on Fox, they have Empire, which is this like hip-hop, upstairs, downstairs story that actually looks really interesting with like original music from Timbaland. But we are seeing more of the networks look to introduce content that is heavier in diversity, looking to do different faces on TV, which is great. I mean, look at the success of something like Scandal, and I think that Shonda Rhimes has done it really well. And on Thursday nights on ABC, she'll have 3 shows, and her new show, How to Get Away with Murder, stars Viola Davis, so that's another one, you know, coming into the space. So that's definitely something networks are looking to do.
Yeah, and it seems like there's you know, everyone always thought of the NewFronts and upfronts as being so different, but it seems like the NewFronts now, they're trying to be more TV-like, and the upfronts are, you know, focusing on so much more on digital and what they're doing. So it's almost to the point where maybe these will just merge into one big show.
Yeah, you know what's interesting though? While the digital players are looking to become more like TV, I actually thought this year the TV networks were very focused on driving viewership to TV and to live and to these, what they use the term, which is a made-up word, but eventized, turning their programs into events. You know, you see things like NBC has been doing the live musicals. They had Sound of Music in December, and they're going to bring Peter Pan, and they just picked up Music Man, and then Fox is doing a live performance of Grease. And they're sort of looking for ways to bring viewers in back to TV, back to watching live. So we actually didn't hear too much. You know, of course, talked about some of like the digital stats and through numbers of engagement and social media out there. But in terms of like digital content and second screen activity and working with Twitter and Facebook, that wasn't really the conversation this year.
But you think they have a chance with the eventizing? I say that stupid word. But do they really have a chance? I mean, it feels like most people are kind of moving away from this appointment TV. I'm going to watch this show at this time, and I mean, except for the Super Bowl and awards and things that we know are real events. I mean, is there a chance that they're going to get people to actually tune in when they want them to?
I mean, look, Sounds of Music did really well. It had over 18 million viewers, so I think that there is an appetite for it, but they can't, like, overdo it. if they overdo it, it's going to lose its allure, and then it's just going to be like everything else. But I think for a little bit, it's working right now. Some of the award shows have their highest ratings in like a decade. So there's definitely an interest there. It's the social moment, being part of the social moment. We saw that Ellen selfie during the Oscars. There's a desire and a want to be part of that conversation.
Yeah, Andrew, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I mean, just as you think you've got everything figured out with people who want to cord cut and to time shift and do it on their own terms, here comes social media, as Jeanine says, and you feel like you're missing out on something if you don't get involved with the snark and the observations and catching that selfie as it happens, and you just feel like you're late to the party if you consume it the next day or watch it much later on. So anything from Game of Thrones to award shows to sporting events to even sitcoms now, social media may have this unexpected result of people feeling like they need to experience it at that appointment viewing time again, whereas before Twitter really took off, there was a huge drift away from that appointment viewing, and I think we're seeing more and more people are feeling that they need to be part of that second screen experience as the show airs live. Not
to mention all the spoilers they might see in social media too.
Right.
Dawn, did you want to jump in with something?
Yeah, I think Andrew hit on a really important point. Social media is definitely creating what the networks refer to as these water cooler moments. It's really driving, seems to be related to live tune-in, and ABC is perhaps the best at this. Their shows Scandal and on ABC Family, Pretty Little Liars, the showrunners actually go online as the show is aired both on the East Coast and West Coast, and they're having conversations with the viewers. So to be part of that social event, you need to be watching as the show is broadcast, and that, of course, is what the networks are all striving for, since when we're watching live, we're not skipping over the commercial advertising that subsidizes the programming.
Yeah, that's important. And what about this, Jeanine, you mentioned that the TV networks are really focusing on getting people to watch, the appointment viewing at a certain time. But there's also this effort by Nielsen and some of the networks to kind of really measure where people are watching things, if they're not going to watch on TV, if they're watching on mobile, or if they're time shifting. I mean, that's been so complicated to pull off, and yet it seems like there's an effort, but is it getting anywhere? And I know, Dawn, you wrote about it too.
Yeah, I mean, it continues to be a part of the conversation and the movement from, measuring from 3 days after a show airs to 7 days after a show airs to sort of make up for folks who are watching on delay. That's a big part of the conversation. The jargon is the C7 window. But yeah, the measurement across tablet and mobile and all of that is certainly a big push, but we're still not there yet. It was the big conversation last year about how much money everyone was losing, and at this point, it's sort of not an acceptance, but there's nothing they could say about it this year, because we're really at the same point that we were last year. So it'll be interesting to see. Nielsen has said things like the end of this year and next year, so hopefully it'll get figured out within the year.
I mean, everyone talks about Nielsen and pretty, detrimental, I guess, behind Nielsen's back. They say a lot of bad things about how it's not very accurate, this and that. But now we're going to bring Nielsen to every device. Is that really that smart, Dawn?
Well, I mean, look, as the neutral arbiter, it's sort of hard. They're certainly going to get kicked. We in the media are familiar with this phenomenon. What's really interesting about what Nielsen is doing, and they're certainly not the only players doing this, is they're trying to create a standard that can be applied across platforms. Up until this point, you've got to kind of pity the poor media buyer and the poor brand, because the online community is using a completely different terminology than has been used for decades in television. So they talk about clicks and engagement and views, and that is utterly meaningless to a brand that is trying to reach an 18 to 34-year-old male. If I'm selling Axe deodorant, I really don't care about all the aggregate numbers. I want to know if I'm hitting the target. So Nielsen has been spending a couple of years at least trying to figure out some way to not only count the views, but try to determine who is viewing, and they've struck a partnership with Facebook that in a way provides a sort of demographic information that's been missing, and this might well free up some ad spending on these new platforms, which is certainly what the folks in the digital world have been crying for, and the networks have been saying, hey, we've got all this viewing that's not counted or monetized. So Nielsen is doing it, and by the way, so is ComScore, a Nielsen rival.
Yeah, and it's funny. I mean, Andrew, I'm curious about your take, but just the fact that we keep talking about, everything on digital is new and better and trackable, and we don't have to have 30-minute shows. We can have, 46-minute shows. We can forget about these Nielsen ratings that we hate so much. Look, now we're going to bring the Nielsen ratings and some kind of numbers that are just to help marketers feel better. So it seems like they're kind of bending over backwards to be more like TV.
Yeah, I think there are still kind of natural time periods that we consume these things in, and we have been conditioned so many years to experience these things in these concrete chunks. I mean, you find a lot of people who watch like 1-hour shows without any commercials. It starts to fatigue you quite a bit. In fact, that's something where it's not just the advertisers who have inserted these things to give you breaks. There actually is a nice rhythm to these shows that we've either become accustomed to, or just the natural rhythms of our brains. We need some kind of break in these
bathroom
shows. So,
break, at least, right?
At least a bathroom break, yes.
But that's what pausing the DVR is for. It's like people would prefer not to have the ads, but I guess now there's more ads kind of being forced onto people who are watching later, or Hulu Plus with ads. So it seems like, I mean, how many more ads can be fit into shows? It seems like that's the other strategy that TV networks are using, is to try to add more ads per hour. If the audience is shrinking, we'll just hit them with more ads, which seems like a difficult strategy to pull off too. What do you think, Dawn?
Well, the LA Times did report. I mean, it's absolutely true that there's more advertising, which would seem to be more alienating and drive the kind of consumption that makes networks crazy. I mean, DVRs are in nearly half of American households now. If you increase the ad load, you definitely increase my incentive to time shift and watch your show later. Even if I start at 15 minutes later, I'm avoiding the assault.
Yeah, and Fannie's showing this chart here. It's showing that I guess TV ads, network ads went from 13 minutes an hour in 2009 to 14 minutes, 15 seconds in 2013, and same kind of looks like over a minute more in cable too. So it's obviously happening, and I guess people are just accepting. I mean, there's nothing they can do, I guess, other than try to speed through them.
Well, they're not actually really accepting it because they're watching a lot of this delayed or DVR'd, where they're skipping through commercials. And there's commercials on demand, but that's only really in the 3-day window that you can't fast forward through a lot of this, 7 days. But a lot of it you can fast forward right through, especially from the cable networks. So there's more commercials, but people have different ways. Netflix doesn't have any commercials, and you could sit there and watch that for hours straight through. And I certainly have spent time binge watching plenty of shows where you can just go straight through, no commercials, and there are ways to avoid it, which means advertisers need to find a way to get their message out there in some way.
Yeah, and I thought it was funny, this Hulu kind of innovation in ads, where you can order a pizza from within the ad, I guess, for Pizza Hut. I mean, that's some serious innovation going on there.
That just seems annoying. I can't imagine a user being pleased with essentially a pop-up coming on their screen to order pizza.
But hey, it wasn't done before, so this is innovation.
Well, TiVo tried that for a better part of a decade, and I don't think anything in ad ever worked on TiVo. So yeah, they're still trying.
Yeah. So tell us, I mean, Jeanine, especially, you've gone to. I'm scared to ask how many upfronts and NewFronts you've been to the last 2 weeks. But what were some of the highlights, lowlights, and just weird stuff that you saw that you just couldn't believe?
After a while, they all start bleeding together when you've gone to like 24 in 2 weeks. But some of the more interesting things, one of the weirder things I saw this week was Pitbull performing at Fox's up front. So you had like Pitbull and like half-dressed dancers like on stage at 4 in the afternoon in a room full of like suits. and him like singing his songs. He has a new like New Year's Eve special coming to Fox, which was why he was there. But it was just sort of awkward. And it's always awkward when you have like any sort of celebrity or like the talent on these TV networks, unless they're some of the really good ones, coming out and speaking, and they just kind of say some awkward jokes, which is always fun. But you know, there's always some interesting performance. Pharrell performed at YouTube, which was a big one. And YouTube's line just to get in was huge in Madison Square Garden, and the same night as the Ranger game, which was interesting. And some other good stuff. NBC put on a really good show. James Spader came on with a funny spoof in a video making fun of a bunch of the top media buyers at some of the top agencies, calling them out as some of them on the blacklist, which was fun and a little inside joke, which, you know, advertisers always enjoy.
Yeah, I would assume something like that is sometimes more kind of useful or works better than even just a performance by a well-known artist. Dawn, were there other things? Oh, go ahead, Jeanine.
I was going to say, I don't think these performances make a whole lot of sense because half the time they don't know who the person performing is, or it's just an awkward setting where you're not going to start getting up and dancing as though you're at a concert in some of these stuff.
That's true. Dawn, what were you going to say as far as some of the highlights and lowlights?
No, you know, I have been enjoying this from a distance, and by that I truly mean enjoying this from a distance. But remember, all the presentations are sort of after the fact. I mean, there's certainly the sizzle of premiering the new shows. The real business gets done over drinks afterwards, you know, when everyone is in a social setting. That's when the real business happens here.
That's true. I mean, and we're not going to know for some time really what the results are of the upfronts and the NewFronts. That's not for quite a while, right?
No, we won't. I mean, those dollars will get committed. We probably won't start seeing those stories for another month. We won't know whether digital has been successful in its pursuit to grab a bigger chunk of the $78 million that were spent on TV last year just in the U.S. Although, you know, the measurement at least is standard across platforms, so maybe they have a better chance than ever.
Yeah, Andrew, was there anything that stuck out to you in watching what's going on, I'm assuming from afar?
Well, the only anecdote I'll bring in is, since my beat is Wikipedia, they've shown that watching Wikipedia traffic on flu symptoms is much more accurate than Google search results. So, in fact, if you look at the activity on Wikipedia articles about these pilots and shows, maybe that's the best predictor of whether these will take off in the popular culture. But we'll see. I'll start doing that analysis. I'll put a tracker on every single show that's been bought this early season, and we'll see the Wikipedia traffic on those articles and see what happens.
Yeah. Was there anything? I mean, I'm also curious. Was there anything that you saw as far as, I mean, the programming around ABC kind of trying to be more niche oriented? Was there anything in programming that looked interesting, or a show that, you know, we should look forward to binge watching? Jeanine, was there something that stuck out to you?
Yeah, a few things. NBC has State of Affairs with Katherine Heigl, which will take the place of The Blacklist when it moves to Thursday night in February. And that actually looks pretty interesting. It looks like it could be sort of the Blacklist-ish in that, like, that procedural, but with a storyline running throughout. And it seemed pretty compelling. There were a few other, actually some, like, thriller type shows with M. Night Shyamalan and a few others doing some of the more horror thriller, The Whispers, and there was a couple of others that seem like Stalker on CBS that people seem excited about. So interesting. Yeah. And also superheroes. A lot of DC comic and Marvel comic superheroes. I think every network except CBS has introduced at least one comic book character for next year.
So in other words, there's so many comic book characters on movies that they had to move to TV too.
That's what it looks like.
Dawn, was there anything that you looked interesting to you as far as something you're going to bookmark and watch at some point?
No, you know what? But I just had an add-on to the invasion of the superheroes in my living room. I mean, this is a completely predictable phenomenon for the media companies. I mean, when the Avengers does $1 billion in box office, there's no question that the media companies are going to try to replicate that success on TV. I was struck by sort of the absence of sitcoms it feels like that, the surge of interest around that has sort of waned. So that was what I found notable in this year's presentations.
Do you think there's more going online or into other formats, or you just think it's something that's kind of comes and goes over time?
It looks like dramas are getting are seeing a bit of a comeback, which is interesting. Perhaps benefiting from all that time-shifted viewing.
Yeah, that's true. You noticed that too, Jeanine?
Yeah, I think especially because when you hear all the hype around things like The Walking Dead or Breaking Bad or Sons of Anarchy and FX and all these darker, grittier shows that are really like pushing the envelope and are winning awards and are getting all of the social buzz, I think broadcasters really want to be a part of that. And comedies are just hard to do. It's the percentages of comedies succeeding on broadcast, they just throw so many out there, and a lot of them get canceled very quickly. And they're really hard to do. There's not a lot of the Modern Families and Big Bang Theories out there. And that's why cable hasn't done a ton of sitcoms, because they're just not easy. And when you see all this really great content in the drama category coming out, I think broadcasters just want to be involved.
Yeah, and I've heard a lot of people talk about this being a real golden age for TV because of the high quality of content we're seeing on cable, HBO, Netflix, some other places. Do you kind of agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, there's some great content out there, great content that's winning awards. And look at True Detective. There's a lot of talent from movies coming over to TV because it's a nice place for these like shorter event series, mini series, to be able to do longer storylines that are really well done and high quality. So we're definitely seeing more talent coming, either movie producers, movie stars coming over to TV.
Dawn, you agree?
Yeah, I think that network television has to thank Netflix, in fact, for sort of the return of the miniseries. I mean, we could argue that Netflix really was instrumental in the success of shows with complex dramas such as The Walking Dead or Breaking Bad, because people were able to catch up to the show and to watch it in its final season. Usually these shows, like for example Lost, lose audience as the years progress because people just lose the narrative and then can't just dive in. So I feel like this resurgence in dramas and in miniseries are in fact a direct result of all this kind of changed viewing that's changed the network landscape and has allowed for more complicated narratives to come back to the screen.
Yeah, and it's interesting that Netflix might be helping out the networks to some extent, but as far as advertising and measurement, we're pretty much in the dark about what goes on there because it's kind of a black box. They don't need to share and they don't care,
right,
to tell everybody how many people watch things, Yeah, which is kind of the antithesis. They don't have to be at the NewFronts. They don't have to be there. They don't care.
Yeah, it's a source of incredible frustration on the part of networks that Netflix has not had to disclose the number of views for House of Cards. It can simply proclaim it a success and say we're doing, subsequent seasons, and we don't have to say how it compares with Game of Thrones on HBO. We're not attracting advertising. We don't need to justify a subscriber fee. All we need to do is add subscribers to our service.
So they're the only ones who don't have to subscribe to Nielsen out of anyone.
Exactly. In fact, interestingly, they strip out Nielsen's video monitoring technology. The bugs don't, the watermarks don't flow into Netflix's service. Netflix truly is the only one that knows how many people are viewing its shows. Not even the producer of House of Cards knows how many people Netflix are watching the show on Netflix.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Well, thanks a lot. Appreciate you joining us. It's been a great discussion, and Jeanine, sorry you've got more to attend today, but it's fascinating watching these things play out, and it's something that we follow a lot on Mediatwits. So I want to thank our panel: Andrew Lee at American University, Dawn Chmielewski from Recode, Fannie Cohen, our Mediatwits producer in New York, Jeanine Poggi from AdAge, and we'll catch you each and every week on Friday for the Mediatwits episode. You can follow us at MediaShift.org. We'll catch you next week. Take care, everyone.